So, Chris, I got some hot topic info watching it. Our whole thing about having these multiple segments, right, is to keep it going. And the number one thing is I asked both internal and external. Folks were asking me about what are we going to do? Agentic AI is everywhere. You mind if I kind of give a little bit of tangent? Because I did a bit of a history lesson to set this one up,
Yeah,
but I'm
let's
not
do
going to
it.
go long, right? So, for those of you that remember way back in the day, there was a family of malware called Emotet. It doesn't actually feel like it was been 6 years, but it has. It's been over 6 years. And this really wrecked a lot of I would call it from probably small enterprise all the way down to small SMBs, because the reason is a lot of those organizations don't use a lot of internal segmentation, right? They're not using whether it's logical or physical segmentation. And Emotet was taking advantage at the time that when they got in and whether they got access to like an admin level password or they were just using the session token and moving laterally from like not even a domain admin, but just a user that had privileges on multiple boxes, it would spread like wildfire. And we saw some nasty cases when this was happening where sometimes it would take 3 days and other times maybe 3 months to be able to help get some of this constant lateral moving software. And this was a moment that we kind of knew that since malware had always like had some worming way before 2019, but this is the first time we saw worming used just so egregious, right? And let's be real, there was plenty of examples of like, even ransomware that had wormed before this, right? WannaCry had worming aspects. But the thing about Emotet, it was also at the same time living off the land. So it was using a lot of built-in applications that you couldn't just play whack-a-mole with antivirus. And you notice I started talking about synchronized removal all the way back in 2019. And what came of this is we tried to push our client base to consider using fully automated remediation. Let's let Huntress not necessarily become an antivirus, but when we are able to do things, for instance, not just like preventative. So think about like post isolation. That has always been our team doesn't need approval to help isolate your network or take those. But we wanted to be more part of the remediation process. And in 2019, we did customer feedback and surveys and got across the board feedback of like, no, I want to be part of that decision in remediation. And so you can see we ended up by the end of 2019. So if you follow in the timeline, right? February of 2019, we rolled this out in action. And actually, we're able to write some pretty neat case studies about assisted remediation and more or less one single magic button. If any of you have been with us for that long, you probably remember, right? Back in 2019, we would deliver you this beautiful remediation plan. It's the very similar remediation plan that you get today, whether it's on the SIM, SAT, right? I guess they don't quite have a remediation plan, but we're getting there. But very much in the EDR and ITDR space, you get these plans. And again, you can approve the darn things. And what was beautiful is in 2019, we were seeing this not only create a lot of incidents, maybe even some of them where the virus itself had been mostly removed, right? But the actual persistence mechanism, those are often called artifacts that lay around and sometimes create support tickets when somebody stumbles onto like a randomly named error that says it can't find a file in a certain directory. And we did. We rolled out assisted remediations and we're able to like quickly remediate all these different online hosts within a handful of minutes. It was a big win. Now, the part that I want to ask you all as our audience is you could probably call out that there's some gaps here, right? We know that reality kicks in. From our endpoint, it sends telemetry to the back end. Huntress then creates our incident report, whether it's fancy algorithms, humans. We send you all, an incident to your ticketing system, whether it's a fancy PSA, maybe it's old school email, whatever you decide to use. And theoretically, what happens is from your PSA or wherever you get it done, you can go and say, hey, I want to tell the Huntress backend, run this remediation for me. But what we learned is not everybody was taking advantage of assisted remediations. And that, by the way, was all the way into 2021 or so. And then what happened is not as many people were actually running remediations. So we tried again in 2022. And if you notice on my actual, like giving anybody history and maybe take a screenshot if you're interested in like how we do some of our platform and go-to-market vision, I wrote about this, that automated response actions and orchestration still with minimal kind of partner and customer interaction is really needed. It's needed because there's staffing and experience gaps. And we got shot down pretty hard, right? Reality didn't really change the same exact thing. But now what's exciting is agentic AI conversations have really shifted people's mindset. And we're at the level that where Chris and I want to have a little bit of the conversation with you all is we believe that what is truly needed now that people are becoming more willing to allow some automated remediation, there's probably some room for maybe some fancy rules and some orchestration engine. But before we get there, I want to start it out with a quick poll. So humor me just for a second. Lenos, if you can cue it up, let's kick a poll. I'm curious. Today is what, May 22nd of 2025. When would you actually allow your managed security team to take fully automated remediation actions? These aren't the isolation and prevention. We know the market is okay with this, but I'm super curious. Is it at any time? Is it do it every time? Is it only like maybe on when you're on vacation or after hours? Or is it still like, nah, that's my job. I'm there to remediate. Don't steal my job from me. I'm super curious how the audience feels about this. And I love the fact that the chat, by the way, if you have any thoughts, this is where you can light me up in chat. If there's something in here, like Kevin already said, like, whoa, this really depends on the client, in my honest opinion, right? And I agree. Some clients, you're like, whoa, if I take that network down, we are going to have big problems. And others of you are actually, it's Perry as well saying, well, yeah, to be honest, I just need the option. Can I have the option? Maybe sometimes it's automated. Maybe sometimes it's this assisted. And what I really enjoy, right? Matt's even calling this out as like, wait, isn't that what I pay you for? What I love is, yes, these are all really good questions. And I see the chat is lighting it up, even like, wait, are you reviewing these remediations? If so, I do trust you all. And so, anyways, I'm going to give just a couple more seconds, and then I'm going to, like, your feedback, by the way, is quite literally going to shape how we're going to implement this. But we've got some thoughts. I just don't want to taint the audience. And considering how many of you's live today, yeah, Aaron saying, "Hey, would there be an abort or undo mechanism?" That's a pretty good one, right? Hey, look, you accidentally blew away my backups. Are you going to have those files? That's a good question, right? And undo is sometimes very costly. Others, I love some people asking, saying, hey, lock it all down and ask for forgiveness later. I mean, that's all good till darn. I mean, we've even seen in some of our earlier days when we did host isolation, I think we killed a domain controller with some of the DNS rules and ended up like really breaking just because the isolation of DCs. We all know we have to be careful, but even just subtle nuances of finding out what order we put some of the rules to, limit network traffic. All right. It seems like we've got a good amount. Chris, I'm going to stop the screen share real quick before I do it. I'm curious. Poll Master, can you show us some of the results? How do people feel about this stuff? I know, again, we gave only 3 of them, but look at that. This is a good example of 2025 being very different than 2023. For those that are just watching this in not part of the Zoom environment, if you're watching like on YouTube or LinkedIn Live or whatever those are, 79% of the audience that voted said, look, anytime I got bigger problems if I don't trust my managed security team. Some folks, 16% said after hours on a set schedule. And what's exciting, only 4% of this voting audience said, hey, look, hell no. Chris, this is super different. Remember when we first
Yeah.
asked this? I mean, we got like
Yeah.
trolled out of the room, did we not? Like it was really
Yeah. I
rough.
mean, very much people had very strong opinions about like, hey, I manage the relationship. I'm the IT person. I need to be involved. Don't do anything that could get me in trouble. But yeah, it's interesting. And obviously, when we built there all of those were considerations. How do we do this in a way where we are really sure we're doing the right thing? It's not going to cause problems, like all of that kind of stuff. And so we'll continue to go down that path, I think.
So for the team, just keeping track of time, Chris, before we move to some of the next segment here, the agentic conversation is spicy. And I'm purposely not going to open some of that now because I don't want to run away from some of our open-ended, kind of mailroom question we got earlier. But we, as at a recent offsite, so my product leader, my CTO, Chris, right, and myself, I think also we had our CISO was at this meeting as well. We were taking a step back and just saying, regardless of whatever abstracted product, right? There could be 30 products over here. The idea is there's a uniform platform, and we've been coming up with and doing a lot of testing, for instance, of creating a bit of a rules engine. So the feedback we've got from you all in the past has been if you're going to create rules or policies that a lot of folks call it, you just got to make sure inheritance works correctly. It's intuitive. Like I want to set this at the top level account setting. However, I need to be able to override this on these handful of maybe organizations like an M365 tenant, or maybe a handful of these data sources on a SIM product, or more realistically, hey, look, I've got these end users, don't mess with them the same way because they're developers. They're going to be running their own software. Be a little bit lighter on them so you don't slow down their build process. And the reason that I'm calling that out is we think that's a big part of a rules engine. We think a proper working system should not only allow you the granularity, but we think the right answer from your feedback is, Huntress, could you come up with a strong best practices recommendation? Whether that's looking at NIST or looking at, CIS, whatever benchmark or standard, maybe even help me understand what you map to. But most importantly, can you all have an opinion? And so we've taken that feedback and we're working that right now of what we think some of these best practices are. And our goal is not to create you more work, by the way. Our goal is to give you enough flexibility that if you want to get into the nerd knobs, you can. But I think at least what I want in a product, I want my shit to just work out of the box. I don't want to go in there and maybe have to make occasional exceptions. I also I think the thing that annoys me most, Chris, is when I put all my time and effort to setting something up, and then either I have a new teammate or I have something new triggers, and then the person comes to me and says, can you explain something you've already made the decision? So Chris, I know right now we do, like, for instance, when we're either doing triages or investigations, we might not know, like, hey, is this a Terra RMM agent allowed on that endpoint? And we sometimes have to ask a question that has maybe a handful of answers. The thing that we want to share with you all is we believe in the R&D now that we're seeing much more of the audience represent our own individual feedback that we've done as well. We believe that we should start storing a lot of your answers, that when you have them, of course, store them as rules that can supersede. That means we're going to look at expanding our escalations to give you more flexibility. So you can say, like, no, I only want to allow this on this one user or this one organization or my entire account. That way, when you set these settings, the basis of a strong rules engine, the way that we believe it is, it powers a lot of our orchestration engine. And Chris, to be very frank, the first version of the orchestration we built was for us, right? You and Jonathan Molieri at the time was our chief architect, and he built out an entire orchestration engine for our SOC to not have to remember these rules. But I think the idea, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, it's to be able to take these actions. So when we have an incident report and we click send, if the rules are already set, we can take action as soon as that's going out the door. Is that the plan?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's how do we set up automated actions based on what we've seen, things that are happening, approvals that we've got in the past, right? If somebody says, "Hey, yeah, we don't do anything with a Terra here," anytime you see it, that's bad, right? Like, how do we start to automate more of those things?
So, team, for those of you who said depends, but maybe 90% for sure, we think some of these rules might need to have conditions. Like, think about not heavy, like, allow me to do anything, but think about very simple, maybe even if this, then that type logic that allows you to say, like, hey, for this type of client, if it's after 6 p.m., do your thing. But for everybody else, I want to own it. Or maybe it's vice versa. I allow you to do it for all of these. But for this particular client, escalate it to me and don't take automated remediation. We think that's a big part of where not only are the rules engines, for instance, logic and settings and policies, but it's also when does this make sense? So think about timing. Some of you, I think it was Sam, chimed up, and it was from one of our earlier episodes. Sam chimed up and called out like a timer mechanism. What if we send you this escalation or even this incident report and a certain amount of like a threshold goes by? So we actually think that's going to be a big part, not just the window of like what time or under what circumstance or maybe what level of criticality, but how much time elapses that allows us to be able to do these things. And I will say one of the biggest things that we're a little bit worried about is we've seen some pretty big incidents go down when we have not had a client or a partner take fast enough action. And so this is where we're really inclined to push the default Huntress standards. If any of you have thoughts on what you think, like I'm watching the chat and Matt, you're throwing good, giving validation of like, I like that timer idea. If you all have some recommendations on what you think are best practices, we've got kind of some of our own guesses, but this is why this like product lab isn't a product pitch. It's a real feedback session. So especially if you all have like, I heard you loud and clear. Seems like a lot of folks are like, generally, I've got a good policy in mind. I think I know some exceptions that I would want to make them. But if you come up with any other things that you also think we're missing on this orchestration engine or rules engine that's outside of maybe the default timer, maybe even in some clients, you're like, hey, I want to strengthen that default timer. This is the type of input that if we get this stuff wrong, well, then it's going to take us a long time to go unwind these things. But if we start building these iteratively, our goal is to start exposing some of these, like maybe in the most critical places first. Like if an incident is critical or high, maybe you want to do different logic than if it was low. That's the type of stuff that we want to learn a little bit more. So, Chris, before I move on, we're right at a good point to be able to transition. Do you have any other things that you think you'd want to get? Because these notes in here are pretty darn good. Like Tim Jackson throughout said, hey, maybe an option to set the time at like our ultimate account MSP level, but allow it to override on certain clients. That to me is a no-brainer. I think that is 100% something that we should support. Do you have anything else, Chris,
Yeah.
that you want to maybe ask the team for feedback, considering like you kind of are like our CTO and you're going to help your team of architects implement this correctly?
No, I mean, I think all of this makes sense. I think, like you said, we've seen a bit of a shift. I think people are more comfortable with kind of our track record and saying, hey, if you think it's bad, like take action, do it. So I think that's really good. I think it shows that, we've been pretty consistent for a long time now. So, I like the timer idea. I think some of these is just like, let's get it in there, let's try it out, see how it goes. We've got humans on the other end of it, so they're going to make that judgment call to say, hey, is this like if I isolate this host, is that going to be bad? So we always have that benefit versus like other vendors who might just be having some AI or some automation doing something. There's no human there to apply that judgment call.
Oh man, Chris, I got myself slightly distracted, but it looks like we've got good feedback. I don't know if you noticed, Chris, I'll stop a screen share, but Kevin called out and said, hey, I heard you guys squashed a bug in Microsoft, specifically 365, that was causing a lot of like the ITDR reports to be like sometimes very delayed. You want to go off cuff for 1 second before I move to the next one and give the
Yeah,
team a heads
yeah,
up? I
that
mean, this
was
this is feedback again from Product Lab that actually helped a Microsoft-wide problem. You got 2 minutes to give us the
yeah.
rundown?
Yeah, so we do a lot here around observability. So we use Datadog for observability within our platform of what's happening and where are the bugs and how long are different actions taking, all of that, right? That's how we track things like our MTTR. How long do we respond? Our MTD, how long does it take us to detect something? We also track a bunch of other stuff, especially when it comes to external things. So for a long time, we'd been tracking what was the timeline between when an event actually happened within Microsoft 365 and how long did it take for us to receive it. And for a long time, this was really consistent up until about middle of February. It was consistent at roughly around 10 minutes. And then suddenly we saw it just going crazy. And it would have these wild swings where sometimes it would be 2 days before we would get the event, or sometimes the events would be replayed 2 days later, or it'd be multiple hours, and it would go up and down. Sometimes on the weekends it would be slow, but then by Wednesday we were back to like a handful of minutes, and so it went back and forth, and through our like continuing close partnership with Microsoft, we talked with them, and they eventually got us to the team in India who actually manages the infrastructure and manages this whole application. We talked with them, gave them some of our feedback. They looked into it and said, "Oh yeah, we got this problem and that problem, but we can fix this." And they did. And now we see the time back to a very consistent less than 10 minutes. So That was not just a win for us. It was really like you said, a win for everybody. And
And Chris, that was
just
anybody
happy
who
that we got
had
that
what?
partnership.
That's anybody who had what, like P1 licensing only, right? If you had like the P2, E3, E5, and were doing your own,
Anybody less than P1. So if you were less than P1, if you had like business standard or something like that, and you didn't have enterprise or intra P1, you couldn't call the Graph API to get the events. You couldn't export the events from wherever, but you could get them from the management API, and the management API was having performance problems.